Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. Before we get too far into the video, if you wouldn't mind hitting the like button, that really helps to get my channel promoted, and that increases visibility for me, so it helps me. So I'd appreciate it if you do that if you can. I also love it when people leave a comment, so if you wouldn't mind leaving a comment, like a suggestion for a video or constructive criticism, how you do things is always interesting to me, I've had a lot of really good tips left by people lately, so that kind of thing is always nice too. So if you want to do that. So I've done a few kind of rings that were in a brutalist style, which is kind of an architectural style that developed post-World War II in Europe, and it's kind of clunky and a lot of concrete and blocky looking. And it kind of translates sort of cool to jewelry. So I'm going to make another Brutalist ring today. Or at least I'm going to try to, and we'll give it a go. I'm going to put a little piece of Chrysoprase in it. I was going to do a faceted prong setting, but I think I'm going to do this little oval Chrysoprase I have. It's a cabochon. So we're going to mount that on top of the ring, and we'll have the band is really where the interesting feature is going to be. So the stone is just to add a little color. Let's give it a try and see how it turns out. Before we do, I wanted to thank some groups of people. In particular, I want to thank my patrons over on Patreon. They're my core group of supporters, and I think they're awesome. There's a lot of really talented and nice people over there, generous with their knowledge, and friendly and willing to share it with others. So it's a really nice community over there, and I really appreciate them making it that way. So thank you for that. The other group of people is my YouTube subscribers, and we just passed 16,900, I believe, which is amazing. We're almost to 17,000. I love it when people subscribe, and I love it. Some of the comments that you guys leave are super nice and really thoughtful and heartfelt. And I do appreciate that, so thank you for that. I also appreciate the super thanks and the buy me a coffees. Those really help to keep me in funds for raw materials, so thanks for that. They've gotten kind of expensive of late. All right, well, let's get started on this project and see if we can pull it off. So these are a couple of my design idea sketchbooks you can get on my merch store. I've started putting important, useful charts on the back. This one that I'm using currently has fractions of an inch to decimals to millimeter measurements, which is really handy for me. This other one, which is a little bit newer, is American wire gauge to inches to millimeters, which I think people overseas might find handy. I try to say the measurements of things in millimeters as well, but if I forget, that would help you to convert it. I like these mostly because they help me to keep a good record of what I've done, and by having this nice little dot matrix in the background, it helps me to be able to draw things better, since I can't barely draw a straight line most of the time. Okay, so let me show you the stone I picked. And so this is the basic idea that I'm going to do. I'm going to have the stone on top here, and this is measured out for about an 8 or an 8.5, somewhere in that range. And I want it to be really jaggedy and rough looking, but still be wearable. So I'm going to use some beat up 18 gauge round wire. I'm going to hammer it to make it a little bit textury, and then we're going to solder it on here. But we're going to have to make it into a band first and mount our setting for our stone, I think, because it'll be, if you soldered all this stuff on here while it was flat, it's going to make it near impossible to bend this around a ring mandrel. So I think we need to solder these on after it's round in order to make it workable. I was initially going to make a bezel setting for this since it's a cabochon, but the more I think about it, this jaggedy look that we're going to have here, I think might look better with some prongs. So I might make a little prong setting for this to start. And maybe even texture it a little bit to make it match the textures of these. So the other thing is, I did a little prototype trial piece. Where did that go? Okay, here's the kind of test piece I did. I curved it, and I beat those little wires up with a texture hammer, and then I soldered them on, and I'm just going to kind of do that. I think in order to get the kind of coarseness I want, I'm going to do a second layer with a few periodically soldered on top of these ones to give it some more bumpiness. And up here, I'm going to have it go all the way around the setting too, I think. So we'll make sure we have this wide enough to have a little wire sticking out on the sides to make it look continuous all the way around. And I was initially, after I did this, I thought, well, that's a little thin, but then that's because I had forgotten I was going to put a little bit more extra on the top, because this is just kind of one layer. And so I think I might go with, this is 22, I believe, and I was going to up it to 18, but I think I'm going to go back to 22 now. So we'll cut a piece of 22, taper it like that, and then we'll make it into a band, mount the setting, and start adding all those little pieces and see how we do. So I didn't quite get those straight on there, but maybe straight isn't necessarily important, as long as they're all kind of parallel. I think that'll be kind of fun looking. It may not be super comfortable to wear, but some people really just like to be fashionable. This will be avant-garde, I would suppose. Okay, so let's make a little simple prong setting for this. I'm going to use 18 gauge round. Oh, the Chrysoprase is a 6x8. So I'm going to cut a little piece of 18 gauge round here. And I think to start with, where did I put him? Let me guess, I knocked him off the table or something. Please, oh, there you are. Spend more time crawling around on the ground trying to find a stone I dropped. Okay, so I'm going to make a ring that exactly matches the shape and size of this stone in order that it can be a platform for that stone to sit on. And then I'm going to make a little cage, an X soldered together out of these wires, and we're going to bend it so that we can solder it down right to the edges of this thing to create some prongs that'll stick up off of the little oval that we're going to create out of 18, and we'll mount that whole thing on there. So that's where we'll start. So let's get this ready to go and file it and everything. If you haven't been to my channel before, I use hard silver sheet solder primarily, and I use a liquid flux that I dribble on with a little dropper bottle. I use my torch is a Silversmith model, which is their acetylene air torch, so it draws in atmospheric air through there to mix with the acetylene. That's a great torch for silversmithing, I think. Alright, so let's see if I can bend this here. You can make this shape however you want. I just tend to kind of free bend them like this. Free bending, is that a term? I think we're still a little bit too big. Let's set this on top of it. I don't want to be able to see the ring at all. It should be completely covered. So I'm probably going to need to snip a little bit out of there. Chrysoprase, if you're unfamiliar with it, is it's an agate, actually. It comes generally from Australia. It's most times in the past I always heard it referred to as the most valuable form of agate, and a lot of times it has this really intense green color, which I've always liked. There's some different slight variations in color that they call different things. There's kind of a yellowish kind they call lemon chrysoprase. Which is kind of attractive too, but it doesn't have this iridescent green color like this. We're pretty close, maybe just a hair more. Thank you to all those people who bought my new ebook this week. I appreciate it. In 2023, I made the first one, and I took each of the projects I did that year, and since I had a drawing of it, as well as a finished product and a video about it, I made a page in this book that includes my sketch. It has a picture of the final drawing, or it has a picture of the final product. It has a list of materials, a difficulty rating, and then some notes I made about the project, which tell you a little bit about problems I ran into or things I might do different, or some suggestions. And that turned out really well, and I think a lot of people benefited from it. So we did one for this year too, and we just finished it and released it on January 1st. And so if you're interested in that, I'll put a link up there for you. It's a nice way to have a whole bunch of projects right at your fingertips, I think. Oh, and there's also, if you don't click on the first link and you look around in the store a little bit, you can get them both for a slight discount if you want to get $5 off for the two of them. So I think they're a valuable resource that you could use for a long time. So, all right, let's solder this closed. Enough shameless self-promotion. So I do something called pick soldering, where I pick up a little bit of solder on the end of my pick and place it where it needs to go when it reaches the soldering temperature. And so if you're interested in learning how to do that, I'll put a link to a video up there. It's a good video, I think, and once you master that skill, it makes things super easy comparatively. So it might be worth checking out and trying to learn that, because, man, it sure speeds up my process. You don't have to use it all the time, but I use it pretty frequently. So, oops, lost that one. Pick it up on the end of the pick, heat your piece up to the soldering temperature, and jump it on there. It's interesting, the stone I chose is actually kind of cut roughly, so maybe that'll add to the brutalist look of it. I think that's about right. So now I want to figure out where I want those prongs to be sitting up. So let's find my marker. So roughly there. And now we're going to make a little X out of some 18 gauge wire. So it's going to make a little kind of tent over the top of this to solder them all together. So it needs to be a little bit longer than this is wide, so that it can go down a little bit. So I'm going to make it about like that big. Actually, I'm going to make it slightly longer than that. I'd rather have a little bit extra to work with and not enough. Those don't have to be perfectly straight right at the moment. I do, however, want to find the middle of them. Pretty close anyway. That's pretty close. I'm going to file a little bit of a notch going at an angle. So here's another trick you can do if you have trouble with having your wires roll around and say I want to keep this little file mark upright. Bend this sideways like that so that it can't roll around. And this one we can just kind of line up there. We can solder those two together that way. And then we'll straighten that out, and then we'll have our little cage we can put down on that ring. It moved more than I wanted it to. Flip over. That's better. Sometimes you can get it to flow again and then move it a bit. If I had filed my notch a little deeper, it wouldn't have migrated so much, probably. That's what happens when you get lazy, Chad. Now, if I look at this, I'm going to spread them out a little bit more than that. Try and kind of get them in the range of where those prongs are supposed to be. I hope I've been in frame this whole time. I've done that a few times where I was filming and I thought I was in frame, but I was doing all this stuff right outside of the view of the camera. Okay, I'm starting to get in the right range here. So, kind of want them to start going down. Okay, so that right there. Now what I'm going to do is bend these downwards. Okay, I think right now I'm going to cut this down a little bit shorter and try and get them all about the same length. Now we just need to get those where they're lined up nicely against that, and then I'll put it somewhere where we can solder it together pretty easily. That's pretty good. Let's see if we can solder those together now. This is likely going to be probably an intermediate-ish. Is that a word? Intermediate-ish project. Probably shouldn't be your first project if you're a beginner, or your second, or your fifth maybe. More like your 30th. You can see why pick soldering though is handy if you've never tried it. It takes a little practice to get it down. I still screw up once in a while, but it does allow you to get stuff where you want it a little more easily in the quantity that you want. Okay, so you could cut them off now, but that's going to make them vulnerable to tipping over when we solder this down to the band. So I usually leave them like this until I get my piece soldered on, and then I worry about getting them lined up a little better. But let's make the band next, and then we'll mount this on there, and then we'll start making those little things to add to it, and then I'll just be kind of piecing it together. But I want to be able to add those without having the chance of this falling off very easily. So we'll see what we can do. Okay, let me find some of that 22 gauge. This 22. Just kind of gauge how wide we want it based on this. That'd be good, about like that. That's pretty close to what I had anyway. Maybe a little wider. Oops. Still got plenty of room on either side, looks like. I'm going to give myself a little extra room to work with. Just because it's easier to get rid of stuff than it is to add stuff. Okay, so I have a mark here and here in the center. Now I need to measure inwards a little bit from each edge. Or outwards from the middle, either way. So let's go, I think it'll be more symmetrical if we do it outwards from the middle. 1, 2, 3 maybe? 3 millimeters out from the center point. 1, 2, 3. That seems about right. Okay. Do the same thing on this side. If we measure out from the center, then even if I didn't have this quite parallel, we should still be able to get them to be about the same size instead of measuring them from the inside. 1, 2. If my thinking is right here. Okay, so need to line it up with that edge there. That. Okay, just going to clean this up with file. Pretty close to an 8 now. This is called a magnesia block if you've never seen one before. So I'm going to solder that right in there, but I need to curve the bottom just a skosh. So I curved it just a little bit. That should probably be enough. Try and get it pretty centered there. Let's see what we can do here. I feel like maybe we can just lean a piece. There we go. So most of the mass is in this bottom piece here. So I'm going to put most of the heat into the band itself. The prong setting on top will get pretty hot just by being in the proximity to the band itself, because it's got a lot less mass. And if you focus on the prong setting, it'll get hot quicker than the band, so you have more of a chance of melting it then. Heat the band, and then just start bumping up the temperature at the top. All of a sudden it's on. Looks like it'll be just fine. So now we need to start making those little wires. I pre-cut some so we could get started on them. You see they're kind of like, just going to kind of work my way down, keep adding pieces on. So we'll probably just position this so that's kind of upright and just start adding them. But first we need to, I think it would behoove us to pre-melt some solder on all of these wires and then texture them and then mount them on there. So let's do that. So, let's see. I have one of these texturing hammers. I'm just going to kind of beat those up a little bit so that they have a little bit of character to them. I'm just going to, as I do these, put them back in this little crucible to kind of keep track of them. And we'll just keep working our way through these. It'll be interesting if this turns out looking cool. I don't know if it will or not. It'll be a fun experiment. So since I went with the prong setting, tell me in the comments whether you think I should have gone with the bezel setting instead. It's kind of a toss-up for me. Okay, I'll be back in a minute after I finish all these. You probably don't need to watch me do all of those. To make things go the best we can, I'm going to start on the back side here, and I did a few more of those off camera, so I have a whole bunch here, And I think I'm going to dump them out so I can select them as I need them over here. And I push the setting down into the magnesia block, which is one of the nice things about magnesia blocks. And I'm just going to get this fluxed and we'll start adding little pieces. So. So again, you have to always think about where the mass is on a piece like this. Right now, most of the mass is in that band here compared to these little pieces of silver. And so we got to spend most of the time heating the big band. Back here. Come on. Let's cool it off so we can push it back in there at a different angle. And just keep adding more. You might be asking yourself, am I worried about those other ones falling off at this point, since I have them kind of floating out there in the air? I'm really not too worried about that because the surface tension of the solder when it's a liquid is pretty strong. So gravity isn't usually enough to pull it off with something as light as this. Okay, so I need to make some more of these things, so I'll be right back. So I made a few more, and I did go ahead and I trimmed off some of these so they're a little bit shorter, and then I can kind of prune them further as I need to. I want them to be uneven but not so jagged that it makes the ring unwearable. And now I'm going to add kind of a second level with a few more. Not everywhere, but just kind of scattered around to give it some bumpiness. I think I'm going to keep it, multi-layered up here at the top, but not so much down here since it's a little bit thinner. And we'll just kind of trim these off nicely so it tapers well. And then I think I'm going to let it pickle. I'll take a look at it, make sure there's no weird gaps or anything. And then we'll get it polished and have it set the stone. So something weird happened to the sound on my video, so I'm doing a little voiceover here. And what I'm doing is I clipped off the top of the little basket, and I'm going to put the stone into the setting, and I'm just going to push those prongs over gently and then cut them off to the right length, and then I'll shape them with a Dremel and clean it up. Okay, well that was Brutalist ring number 3. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to hit the like button before you leave. That really helps. And I'd love it if you'd take a moment and check out my main channel page. I have 425-ish videos as of the release of this one, I believe. Somewhere thereabouts anyway, so there's a ton of content. There's content there that's appropriate for beginners or people who are more advanced or anywhere in between. And there's a lot of project videos, so if you're looking for ideas, it's a great place to look. So watch a few, come back, subscribe to my channel. I'd love to have you do that. The other thing is, check out my video description down below. There's some important links down there. The most important one right now is I just released my second ebook, which is a guide to my tutorials on YouTube. It's a book that has links to each of the videos that I did during 2024, including a picture of the project, a picture of my sketch that I draw, raw materials you need, a difficulty rating, and some notes that I made about the project that I might not have said in the video, or that observations I had after I made that one. So it's a really useful tool and a good way to have a whole bunch of projects right at your fingertips, and it supports the channel, so I do appreciate it. But there's a link for that down there. There's a link to my merch store if you want to get one of those nice design idea books that I keep my records in. And there's a link to Patreon if you want to check that out. It's a nice community. So Thanks again for coming. Take care. Happy silversmithing.